His last name is Schnitzel?
Schmidt.
I was going to say, that's
All right, welcome to Trade Secrets. We are back after a couple weeks, maybe even a month or two off after the...
all of our wounds had to heal after the political podcast.
Yes.
It was a couple assassinations ago.
We're still, unfortunately, in political season. But in any event, welcome.
Michael's always in political season.
Oh, Jesus. Welcome back. Obviously, my co-hosts Michael and Paige with us today. Like us, love us on whatever app you're using. And we are excited to get back at it. And we're going to do something a little different today.
Yeah, we're going to actually talk about real estate.
We're going to talk about real estate, which is a good thing. And we're going to decide who's got better information. Gemini, which is Google's AI technology, or my cohorts here, Michael and Paige. And the topic today is subleasing. So I thought, all I've heard about is, are real estate people going to be important? ChatGPT or AI can figure it out. So I asked Google, and therefore Gemini, what were the pros and cons of subleasing office space? And I figure we could go through these answers and then hopefully debate if it has it totally figured out or what it's missing. And let's see if we can put a little totem spin on it.
Man versus machine.
Man versus machine.
Well, it seems like machine versus machine.
Why is that?
Because you said you ran it through Gemini and ChatGPT.
No. I was just using them in the like Kleenex versus tissue concept. It only went through Gemini.
Got it.
I did not go ChatGPT. So this is Gemini's answer.
And can I ask a clarifying question? Did it go through Gemini, or did you just Google it and get an answer?
I went through Google, and now the first answer on every Google search is
like
Gemini.
The generate. Okay.
It's got like it. If you look at Google now, first answer to every question is, here's our AI answer. So this is Google's AI answer to the pros and cons of subleasing office space. And in its very computer-esque way, it says subleasing office space can have both advantages and disadvantages, including, and number one was cost. Subleasing is often cheaper than dealing directly with a landlord because commercial leaseholders are eager to find new tenants quickly. Fact or fiction?
Fiction.
Fiction.
All right, why fiction?
Well, because it doesn't take into, I think that makes a lot of assumptions of, if you walk into a space and you can use it exactly in its current condition on that day, but even still, that doesn't mean the master tenant is going to lease it to you for a substantially discounted rate. So I just think it doesn't take into account a lot of things, like you're not going to get any tenant improvements to make that space yours. Like you are just moving into someone else's space.
Michael, you said fiction. Why?
It varies market to market. Okay, if you're in the downtown Pittsburgh office market, you're going to get a bigger bang for the buck. If you're in the downtown Dallas market, whatever rate that they have most likely has an escalator clause in it. If there's a sublet or an assignment, that they're going to have to pay more. So it's like anything else, it's going to vary where you are. Now, then you talk about the additional cost that Paige had mentioned of actually moving yourself into the sub to the prime tenant, and there's additional costs that are attached to that. And if you have to do any kind of modification to the space or tenant improvements or any other of that, quote unquote, what would have to be there, it could be a savings, it could be a break even, and it could be an additional cost.
Sure.
And I think it depends on who the master tenant is, whether or not, some people will just let their space sit there rather than dealing with the hassle of subleasing it at a discount. So.
And there's also the issue of, does that particular term remaining fit, or is it an additional obligation to you over time? So there's a lot of moving parts that an answer that are not going to be covered in one Google search.
No, and I love being judge and jury here. I'm going to say that man beats machine because your guys' answers were very good. I think there's a lot of nuance to it. The thing neither of you picked up on, though, is that it said because leaseholders are eager to find new tenants quickly. And then, Paige, you kind of touched on that by saying some people would rather the space just sit there versus sublease it. Why? Like, give some examples of why somebody might not want to sublease their space, even though they're not using it.
Because they still are liable. So, when you find a subtenant, that doesn't absolve you from your still upholding the lease agreement that you signed with the landlord. So a master tenant might not want to bring in a subtenant to sublease the space because they don't really have control of what that subtenant is doing in the space, but they are still responsible to the landlord to make sure that no part of the lease agreement they signed is disregarded or falls into default. So there's a liability
on top of liability.
Huge liabilities.
The company already understands their liability, but as soon as they bring a subtenant into the mix, they've exacerbated it, even though they reduced potentially cost. Okay. All right. The next answer from our good friend Gemini was flexibility. Subleasing offers flexible lease terms. Fact or fiction?
Depends.
Fiction.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Michael actually answered the question. Paige, you going to answer it?
Yeah, I would say, again, this is nuanced, so I would say that's well, it can be the fact in some cases.
But this is Google. It has all the answers. Is it fact or fiction?
Nothing's black or white. I would say
She's a really good listener.
It's on the
I
interweb.
am a good listener. I'm just saying I would say it's more fiction than it is fact.
Okay,
yes.
so you're in the fiction bucket.
Or-
We'll let you think about it. Michael, why'd you say fiction?
I don't need to think about it. I
Well,
can explain
when you
it. But
sublet something, first of all, sublet is an interest in time, but all of your the previously negotiated terms and conditions are etched in stone. A prime tenant cannot give a right that they've already given away or they do not have to the next guy. So you are limited in what you can do just simply based on what that intermediary tenant has already committed to. And unless the time frame of the term or the dollar, the only thing it's really flexible on is the dollar. Okay, because everything else is pretty much etched in stone.
But also, the shorter period of time commitment can
Potentially.
give flexibility to tenants who don't, I'm working with several right now. They're in a period of rapid
Transition.
growth, or new to market and are going to be building a team, and they're not willing to commit to even, to 3 to 5 years because they don't know how drastically different their team is going to look in that time period. So I would say for them, a sublease would be a good option if it met the needs that they had for their team, because it would allow them to only commit to a certain period of time while still having a home base for their employees that is strictly theirs, potentially offering a discounted rent rate to what the master tenant is paying. But yeah, as Michael said, the pre-agreed upon terms that they will have no say.
You could also be locking yourself into an encumbrance. Let's say that you have a short term that's remaining. Well, that time flies by, and you could be facing a much bigger bullet when that initial term ends, and now you're facing
A change in the market.
a change in the market
Sure,
and a higher escalated rent.
But if you're willing to
specific-
take that rent from
Specifics to the
Specific
flexibility.
to this concept where it says subleasing offers flexible lease terms, I would agree that you guys were both correct that is fiction, because there are some, and Michael hit the nail on the head, fixed terms that you can't get away from vis-a-vis the original master lease. All right, so man is 2 for 2.
Team man.
Team man. Team man / woman, right?
team person.
Oh, sorry, Jesus. Team person. Good Lord. In any event,
Knew that would ruffle some.
Gemini now says networking, subletting can lead to new partnerships and collaborations with other businesses.
So can a direct lease.
Fact or fiction? Come
Fiction.
on.
Well, fiction.
All right. Michael?
It's an
I mean, it
irrelevant
can.
fact.
It's a fact. but
Irrelevant fact.
Yeah.
Okay. So you either want to jump in and
Yeah, it could lead to a good relationship. It could lead to a bad relationship.
Yeah, you could
But there
become friends
are a
with a
million
tenant,
other
sure.
things that could lead to a different relationship.
all right, we're gonna move on because I think this one's neutral. Fact.
I can
and
network
fiction.
at the grocery store. I don't need
Yeah, this is like the
dumb.
easy button. The computer was like, yeah, you might meet new people in your space that you're subleasing. That's crazy. My
Sounds like a
assumption
marketing
is,
person writing a brochure for a sublease availability.
my presumption when I read this the first time was that they're thinking co-working is the same as subleasing. Like
Yeah.
the computer didn't differentiate between the two, which in theory does lead to new friends and partnerships because you're all sharing space. But all right, maintenance. Subtenants I love how every single one of these is qualified. Subtenants may take more responsibility for the condition of the property, which can lead to improved maintenance.
Say that again.
Improved or
Subtenants.
additional.
So this is, again, Gemini. Maintenance. Subtenants may take more responsibility for the condition of the property, which can lead to improved maintenance.
Are they saying like rather than the space going dark? But that's a benefit to who? The landlord, not the subtenant.
Yeah, so fact or fiction?
I'm still trying to come
I am
to
strong on this one, but
terms.
again, the maintenance of the facility is the pro/con, and Gemini is saying subtenants take more responsibility for the condition of the property, which can lead to improved maintenance.
No,
I'm going to say that's
fiction.
fiction just simply because there's too many other variables attached to it.
And they're not live. I mean,
I'm going to say it's fiction with Paige. Like, they don't have any responsibility. The master tenant has the ultimate responsibility. And if they're subleasing space, it's kind of like renting an apartment versus owning a home. You're just not going to take the same care of it. It's bonkers to me.
yeah.
This is so
Yeah.
far outside.
Okay,
left
first
field.
of all, I really don't like how it was crafted, but if you
Write
are,
Gemini
if you
a
would,
letter.
I don't know what.
See how their feelings are.
No,
This is the
because
beginning
it
of
could be if
Michael
it's
developing a
something that
relationship with a bot.
All right, we're moving on. That's classic.
Pass.
Man wins again. All right, legal protections. Subleasing may come with limited legal protections.
the way the question is stated, fact. It may come with limited
I would
legal
agree on that one.
protections.
Yeah, I think that's fact, and Gemini gets a that-a-boy on that one.
So they're not breaking these into pros and cons, right?
It just said these are the
pros and
advantages and
cons.
disadvantages, correct?
Okay.
My guess is
Okay.
Gemini 2.0 might answer the question a little differently. Maintenance delays. If you need landlord maintenance or repairs, you may need to go through your sublessor, which may cause delays.
So
Fact.
that's fact, yeah.
Fact and fact, I don't think there's much debate on that one. If you've got to go through another layer of conversation, that's a
third party
win for Gemini.
And just as additional context, and candidly, I haven't read anywhere near as many sublease agreements as I have lease agreements. How frequent is that if a subtenant needs maintenance done, they still have to pass that through the master tenant? Or, is that a common occurrence?
I think that
Or like sometimes this happens?
a sophisticated subtenant is going to ask for permission to both the master tenant and the landlord for the right to ask for those services to be performed by the landlord directly. And even if you get it, your only ability to enforce that right is through the master tenant. So I would say in all cases, your only recourse, if the landlord doesn't perform, is back through the master tenant.
Absolutely.
Unless the master tenant and landlord sign off on a new amendment to the lease that changes the rules. If they don't, which my experience tells me they don't, it has happened and can happen, but by and large, master tenants and landlords are unwilling to change the rules of the road of the master lease because there's no,
Yeah.
unless in the one example where Joe Schmo leased a whole bunch of space and now wants to sublease it, and Amazon wants to sublease it. In theory, the parties could agree to let Amazon get new rules. But the frank reality is it wouldn't become a sublease. What would happen is the landlord
Would take it prime
Yeah.
immediately.
would make a direct deal with Amazon.
Yeah.
So, all right. So as of now, we are 1 neutral, 3 man, 2 machine. And that's really not to say that the machine won. It's just to say that the
it's
machine
just
was
say
right.
that
Knew something that we knew. Lease term. You may not be able to extend the lease term beyond the original term's length.
fact.
Fact, and fact. So Gemini got that one right. And tenant improvement allowance. The original tenant may not be willing to offer an adequate tenant improvement allowance for your needs.
Fact.
That is a fact. But talk about the pros and cons of that, because I think as we dig just a little bit deeper into the totem version of pros and cons, now that we've played the little Gemini versus man game, what are the issues around the very simplistic answer that Gemini gave, which is they may not be willing to offer? I mean, there's so much more to it than whether they will or won't offer TI allowance or enough of it.
You answered your question with the question.
Well, I'm good at that.
No, it has nothing to do with the real world. This is just off the cuff answer that, hey, this guy might not give you tenant improvements. Okay, great statement.
Right.
Or what was the other one? It said this may be an issue. If as advisors, we don't advise people. This may be an issue when you're talking about something on a granular level.
Right.
Yeah, it's case by
We
case.
try to give them a
yeah.
little bit more of a finite answer.
So, what are some, obviously now that we've kind of gone through all of the answers that Gemini gave, what are some other, from a tenant's perspective, meaning you're the subtenant, what are some things that are good for you as the subtenant as compared to if you're just leasing space directly?
I think the very first thing as a subtenant that you should consider is, what are my goals here? What are my parameters of leasing? Okay, because this very well might offer something that is a lot less expensive, gives you the flexibility, has someone who already has liability that you're just tagging on to. Is an opportunity, but in the same breath, it might be a risk. So you'd have to have very defined goals. Like you said, Paige, I only want this for 3 years or 2 years, or I want it because it has all the furnishings that are in place. I want it
Right.
because this is an extension type of scenario. I want it because I'm in a great market at half the rent. I want it because I'm willing to deal with what comes in 2, 3, 5 years. So it really goes back to having a good understanding of what your availability is. Now, as far as leverage for the prime market, every landlord in downtown Pittsburgh understands you have sublet alternatives, and they have to be a little bit more aggressive with what they're trying to offer in their prime deals, because that's always an option to you.
Right.
And knowing what we do for a living, we leverage the hell out of that. So that's another arrow in your quiver that you didn't have in markets that don't have a lot of sublet space.
Yeah, I mean, I think, let's see here, of the last half dozen tenants that we've represented in the market in the last 30 or 60 days, they've all put a heavy emphasis on trying to find sublease space for a host of reasons, most notably reduce costs. And you hit the nail on the head, even though you didn't elaborate much, is the concept of securing furniture. Like, it's expensive, and if it's all sitting there unused, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars of savings, which gets lost in the rent conversation sometimes.
That
And
you
it's just
literally
and it's
walk
hands
into.
off. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have to do you don't have to spend any of the time or energy designing, acquiring, scheduling time for assembly, delivery, any of that. Like, it is just there ready to go. So, what we've seen a lot is smaller or
Even Softwriter's a full floor downtown.
yeah.
I mean,
But like they
Furniture and
capital,
equipment.
yeah, but they were capitalizing on someone else's decision to not be downtown. They saw it as an opportunity to be in that area for less brain damage, a better rate than they could get anywhere else around the city, and it was like plug and play. So I think, that the plug and play opportunity, if you are running an independent business and you are so immersed in the operations of that day to day, and you don't have a real estate team or a workplace strategy team that can do all that conceptual, or you don't have the time, frankly. If you're 6 months away from a lease expiration and you have 20,000 square feet, like, you are in a pinch. You are in a bad place, and a sublease that's plug and play can help bail you out of that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think AI misses, at least at this point in the game, and I'm sure that will change as the years go by, but the concept of leverage. And like, let's briefly talk just about who's got leverage. The landlord, the master tenant, the subtenant, like, those things move the needle in terms of where deals get done. Mm-hmm. And how do you have leverage in a conversation about a sublease unless you really know what the market options are, right? Like, SoftWriters, that example, they moved into SAP space. We talked a little bit about the advantage of cost, moving into furniture, moving into equipment. All the computers were there. Technology was there for the conference rooms. We talked about the fact they didn't have to deal with an 18-month construction project, City of Pittsburgh permitting process, architects, designers. So who has the leverage? Did SAP have the leverage because they had all of this amazing space with all this stuff ready to go? Or did the tenant have the leverage because they were ready to sign on the dotted line and move in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a function of size and time. When you look at the amount of spaces of that size, I think it's space dependent, it's market dependent. How many spaces of that size are dark, and how many tenants are out there willing to commit to a space in short order? So yeah, I think it's like a money in, money out, and how quickly question.
I think it's supply and demand, and always driven by those people that have the money. SoftWriters had the money to spend, and they happen to have the product that was selected. If SoftWriters didn't step to the plate.
You mean SAP had the money to spend in the product?
No, that was already a sunk cost. They'd already spent that.
That money was spent.
That money was spent. That was already a liability. To simplify everything, real estate's a box. When it's empty, it's a liability. When there's someone in there paying rent, it's an asset. And they had already made the decision that they're going to incur any potential downstream liability by putting it up for sublet. And now that the reason they did that was to defray costs.
Yeah.
And so I think the leverage ultimately was with SoftWriters. Now, in working the deal out with the landlord and SAP being so much larger, I'm sure that they could have thrown their weight around. But if you weren't an SAP, I would say that the leverage probably would have remained with the landlord because they have approval rights. Mm-hmm. So a lot of different moving parts in sublet scenarios, but a lot of great advantages, and certainly ones that you should always consider when you're looking at the overall conditions of a market.
And I think that is the wrap and the PSA for getting somebody like Totum involved, and whether it's Totum or another real estate expert, understanding the market, understanding option A versus B, what to do in lieu of your next best alternative is really where, at least in today's current state, I don't think the machine can even remotely bring value to the table like the three of us can. So with that, that's Sub-Leasing 101 from Totum and from Gemini, courtesy of Google.
That was fast.
And we are working on speeding these things up and getting to the point. So hopefully you enjoyed it, like it, love it on all of your apps. And if you've got a topic you want to hear us debate, man versus machine, let us know. We'd be happy to take a stab at it. So hit us up in the comments, and we hope you have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.